Welcome to Talking About My Generation. I'm Herb Ricardo with Alicia Vassar and the great Rich Grego. And today we're going to talk a little bit about career, a little bit about our why. Okay, why did we choose the path that we did? And obviously, there's Rich and I here that we've got a historical perspective, and we have Alicia over here who has she's had a couple of jobs in the past. Alicia's got a couple of current jobs right now. And we're going to talk a little bit about uh, maybe a little, where Rich and I and how we ended up doing the things that we did. And then also, were there any times of reflection during our career path? I think the way life works out is that you don't just have a career, have a family, have friends, but I think during that time we're constantly reflecting on whether or not we chose the right career to be in. In your career, and people who even love their careers, whether they're doctors, lawyers, nurses, teachers, computer science experts, everyone at one point starts to reflect and say, am I in that right position? And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the factors that have helped shaped the environments that we've chosen. And I think I'm going to go and open it up to Rich a little bit and say, Rich, how did you get into it? And I think you've mentioned it once or twice, but in
Eh,
doing so, also talk about some of your reflections
yeah.
while being a professor.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it makes me wonder too, and I thought about it, how many people who wind up being professors have that as a career goal. I suppose more than other, you think like people who become, a lot of people I've met who are police officers or firemen or things like that, even doctors, the nurses, they can remember ever since they were a little kid always wanting to do that, right? Um, I'm not sure about professors, right? Because usually when you go into this kind of career, maybe any educator, you have an interest in a particular area of research or study or knowledge or occupation, and you want to pursue that. You just want to follow where that leads, and then for certain things like philosophy and or history, you wind up very often being a professor, I think. So if I had to describe my trajectory, maybe um, I'd have to look at it in terms of that, right? I just had some very important, profound life questions that I had and passions that I felt I needed to pursue. And that was kind of my career North Star that I was sort of always traveling toward. And I wound up in this locale because I was traveling to that destination, and kind of it was a destination that led me here. I don't know if that's a comp. I mean, look, if I had the when I was growing up, I wanted to be a world traveling, jet setting, international spy, scholar, male escort to the rich and famous. And you see where that's led. So see where that got, how well I've done along those lines. But in terms of my career and reflecting on it, I think I can't imagine where else I might have landed. I had other passions and things that I was interested in, but I suppose maybe, as the existentialists say, we all get what we in some sense deserve because of what we put into life.
Rich, I think you can probably meet all three of those objectives even now.
Yeah, that's true.
I wouldn't knock those off your bucket list at this point.
You still got a
Okay.
full life ahead of you.
So,
That
Continue to
is
do it.
true. Yeah, best
uh,
time than ever, too.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So you're right. You're right in the sense that there are individuals who had passions when they were children, right?
Yeah.
Of what they think that they wanted to be,
Yeah.
and then went into those particular career
Yeah.
and locations. And I think if you think about math, and I think I think so, math and English and history, where as you grow up and you like to write and you enjoy math and numbers and you like to read about history, then that would be a natural progression to become a professor, if that's what you want to be a teacher, to teach something that you truly enjoy. I find in my discipline in business is almost the complete opposite.
Mm,
Most professors in business, again, are they go into business and they're in business.
mm,
Maybe they're in marketing, human resources management, operations, consulting, whatever it might be, and then as they get a little older, they decide, you know what, I don't like the rat race of business. I want to slow it down a little bit, or I'm having reflections of how I learned a lot of this, and I'd like to kind of give back. And as someone who's been in higher ed in the School of Business for 25 years, I've had a lot of business people come to me. I'm spending time, I'm doing consulting with them and everything else. They're like, well, I'm interested in teaching as well. As a matter of fact, I was working with one CEO this week, and he's really interested in joining our team. So,
Oh no.
and
Did he
he'll be
freeze for
back.
you too?
Yeah. I'm thinking he'll be back.
To
Maybe
keep it
not.
going, I think this is really interesting that you guys are kind of I feel like teaching's kind of maybe it's I got this from bell hooks, but it feels like maybe there's a part of people that and maybe it's all people, maybe it's only certain people have this kind of thing, but
Mm.
it does feel like teaching is like a calling a lot of times.
Yeah. That's interesting. You're right. I take that.
Oh, there we go. He's back.
Oh, good. Yeah, but I think that's a good observation you make, Alicia. And I think, as a matter of fact, I completely retract my initial statement. I think for some people, yeah, and I have heard people say that from when they were little kids, they've always been drawn to teaching, or related stuff, and that was a calling, from early on.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if people, who want to be there. Because I really do think in higher education, there's a difference between teaching, the teaching mode of the profession, and the scholarship mode of the profession.
Yes,
And I
definitely.
tend to like scholarship, or at least I've grown into that. I like teaching too, actually. I found I liked it when I did it. But I think that people who have a calling to be, well, I guess people seem to have a calling to be one or the other. And I was going to
Mhm.
ask Herb as a follow-up, Herb, to what you just said, and I'm sorry you got cut off a little bit there, but
it's okay.
do you think that there is a difference in career tracks between people who are teaching at, say, the elite school, the Ivy League, Wharton School, and places like that, um, in terms of their backgrounds and where they came from in their career trajectory versus, like, say, at Indian River State College, or where I
Sure.
taught? Do you think
Uh,
there's a difference there, or do you think any of them have always just taught business, or been business professors, or have those guys, say at Wharton School, always, did they begin their trajectory as business people and then go into teaching afterwards?
I think there's a combination, and
Yeah.
I would have to say it's probably something like a 70-30. I would think that about 30% of faculty at Ivy League and higher tier universities um, stay through their education environment and then go on to teach. But
Yeah.
I would have to say the majority go into their respected fields and become people in business and then
Mhm.
come back.
Yeah.
But kind of going back to your point between colleges and universities, there's no doubt that there's a difference, and you alluded and you mentioned it, and that is, do you become a professor because you like the scholarly work and you like to do research and you like to be an expert in your discipline, specifically through a research base, and then share it with people through
Yeah.
um, journals and books,
Aw,
whatever. What
I was really getting into it. Okay, there
There
you
you
go.
go.
You
am
you
I
went
out
off
again?
again.
Am I out? I'm going in and out, right?
Yeah.
You all are still with me, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
But anyway, and then there's individuals like myself who I enjoy being what we call a lecturer. And so I'm in the classroom, whether I'm here at Indian River, a lecturer there, or I'm in the Czech Republic and I'm a lecturer there. Um, I, I do my own research. I put together a lot of my own documents, and then I share that with the class, and I modify that accordingly. I'm not at a university. I don't have TAs. I do enjoy that faculty, professor, student role and relationship. So in a lot of what I've thought about over the years is
I think that is a really good. Oh, you went out again, so I was gonna take over. Um, I think it's very interesting hearing you guys speak about this because one of the key things that I feel like younger people go through is this kind of stage of like, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do this? How do you even begin? And you don't realize that you already, in a sense, are beginning. Like for me, like you guys were saying about the scholarly aspects of it, and you kind of build into it. Um, I've always been super engaged in my classes and learning, and especially the things that I really glom to.
Mm.
So it's interesting to see that naturally, because as I've just kept taking in more and more work, I want to work out in the field and get practical knowledge, but it feels like teaching and going to more of an area of being a professor feels I also think it's interesting that I've instead, like before, when I had first thought of it, I was like, okay, I'd singularly be this, and I didn't think about how much larger, uh, I
Mm.
guess, work can contain because you can be a professor, but a lot of times professors do a lot of different things. They're in other organizations. They're all throughout the student body and stuff. So it's very interesting hearing you guys' perspectives and how you got into it because
When you were a really little kid.
so I was thinking about the fact that this is probably representative of how good of a support system I had.
Mm.
But everyone always knew that I was super intelligent and supported that and that I love to read and all of these things. So I, from a young age, was like, I think I had my little fame stage, but I'm not a super fame hungry person or like I don't like tons of attention. So I was like, maybe singing. Um,
Mm.
but once I started getting into learning things, it was like, okay, I'm going to become a scientist. I'm going to be, uh, a lot of times it revolved around science. Then I became obsessed with history. So I was like, oh, so maybe I'll be a professor because that's history is a very strange degree path because now I have the idea of how that could be applied in different areas. The
Yeah.
skills you learn in history, researching and stuff, those are skills that can be applied in a lot of jobs. But back then, when I had a very rudimentary idea of it, I was like, okay, so teaching is where I'm going to end up.
so you think as far as your thought process right now, Alicia, is teaching is where you think that you'd like to be?
Mm.
Definitely. Because even when I was so post uh getting my degree was in business. Just because when I went into college, I was like, I need to do something. I was going to do science, but I didn't want to stay too long. Um, so I ended up in business and I kept going through business and I did my bachelor's and stuff. And through it, I've kind of learned how I've found the little skills of like organizing through it. Um, the way that organizational cultures interact with each other, making an organization work efficiently, all of those different things. Sorry, I was just talking. What was the question again?
Just curious as to how you determined the fact that you want to
Oh,
be.
that I was going to do teaching. Um, so after doing that kind of business bachelor's and stuff, I kept doing my own kind of research, reading and different things. And through business and learning that I like the organizing aspect, I also realized there's a communication aspect. And there's, I mean, even within the business degree path, I was looking at HR and I was really looking at the training aspects of it because I do teaching, like I said, it feels like a calling in a lot of ways. I've always, I mean, this also could be I'm an older sister, so that was always a thing
Mm,
that was around. I was the oldest of grandkids and stuff, so naturally teaching was throughout my life. So it didn't, yeah, for me, it feels like it's very much a calling.
Yeah, yeah. Rich, in giving Alicia some support here, as as you went through your career, and maybe think back to your early times, um, who were individuals who
mm,
helped inspire you or support you in your role? I mean, did people say, "Wow, you're a professor. How do you like it?" Or "That's great." Uh,
mm,
what were some of the interactions that you had either with friends or with associates that
mm.
kept you in that role?
I probably, and I maybe you'd be better qualified. Well, maybe not then. Because I think both of us, to some extent, compared to our colleagues, had different, less conventional career trajectories. I'm thinking, right? But I can say, in terms of helping me discern what it was I wanted to do and what supported me along the path that I was traveling. I was fortunate enough to become from a family of educators. My father was a college president, for God's sake. So I mean, so they always. I grew up when I was a little kid. I had there were two libraries in my house. We lived in a big house. There were two libraries, and I always had one thing my parents would never, they didn't buy me a lot of material things when I was a kid unless I did something to earn it or whatever. But they'd always buy books unquestioningly if I was interested in something and that kind of stuff. So my guess is that I was probably unconsciously steered in that direction and supported in that vein throughout my entire life. My parents were always, I was fortunate. They were interested in whatever career path and I had various ones, as you know, Herb, and I did various things in my life, but they were always probably unconsciously, if not more supportive, more interested when I was doing things along the educational or at least the scholarly line than anything else I did. So I'd say that's kind of what steered me in that direction. And I bet that's true of a lot of people. I know so many people, right, who go into a career path that's close to what they grew up with, what their parents were doing. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case with you, Alicia. I don't know enough. And with you, Herb, I'm not really sure. But what do you guys think? Do you have a similar kind of, do you think,
So
trajectory?
it's interesting because my parents aren't traditionally teachers in any sense,
Yeah.
but I always get like I would always get from people that are like, "Are your parents teachers?" Because
Mm,
of the way that I speak is very, I guess, proper or grammatically correct or
mm,
something. Neither of my parents are teachers. My father is college educated,
mm,
so I'm not like a first generation college student by any means. Um, but I think in little ways, my parents have their own things that they like teaching. Like my mom's into gardening right now. So I learned so many different things about plants. Like she gets into the like nitty-gritty of the like biology of it basically.
mm,
But then you have like the chemistry that goes into, making sure that the soil is properly, has the nutrients and all of these things. She's also been super into like midwife care. She's worked to become like a doula and stuff. So
mm,
learning has definitely been something that I've been surrounded by. My father, like I said, college educated. Um, he's always taught me history. He's always been like history is kind of
mm,
our thing that we brought
mm.
that he's kind of influenced me in my life. So I think in a lot of ways, even though their career trajectories never went through teaching, I think personality wise, I definitely fall in line with it.
It's interesting.
Yeah, that's good.
How about you, Herb?
So, for those who know me quite well, meaning known me since I was a child. I did not like school. I did not like school at all. Uh,
Wow.
even in high school, I dropped out of high school for a while, and I just did not like, believe it or not, I loved my friends. I loved playing soccer, football in the field when we had recess and break. I always enjoyed that. Then when I finished school out in England and came back to the States, and I was in college. I dropped out of college a couple of times because I couldn't really stomach the structure of it, to be honest with you. I just didn't really understand. I did like to learn. I've always enjoyed learning, but I just didn't like the structure of it. So, but I always enjoyed work. I enjoyed working. I could put in thousands of hours. Those of you who know me, you know I just put in a lot of hours in at work, and so I enjoyed that. And so, I recognized fairly early that I wanted to go into administration, and my trajectory was I had to go back to school, back to college, get my degree. I earned a degree. I was working in the field. I was working in public health. Then I earned a graduate degree. I earned my master's degree. And I loved it, and I loved being an administrator. But one of the things what was really interesting is that as I worked, I would often explain to the nursing students who were coming in and doing their rotations. I would explain a lot about whether it was in public health, whether it was in rehab, dialysis, whatever area of healthcare facility that I was in. I would share that with them. And one of the instructors said, "Wow, you explain it pretty well and everything else. You should be an instructor at the college." And I kind of laughed at them because if you look at my grades, I just barely got through college and university. Really, barely. But anyway, I got talked into joining, and I applied, and I had an extensive interview, and they offered me the job. And naively, I said yes, and got the position. Never taught, obviously, and learned the skill of teaching. And I think just for a lot for this particular podcast is that very quickly, one of the things that just drew me was it was not those great A students and B students that I had in the class, which I absolutely loved. They were inquisitive and they would challenge me, which I thoroughly enjoyed because in the real world you get challenged all the time. But it was the what I would consider the little Herbies, the little Herbs and Herb Ricardos in the back that sometimes they weren't getting it. Education didn't come strong for them, and I wanted to help them. I wanted to get them across the line. So I made that my passion, and so in designing an environment for individuals who didn't necessarily adapt really well to higher ed, I think I made it pleasant enough for everybody. And so I tried to create an environment that I would enjoy, which has to do with music in the classroom, joking around a little bit, but also the discipline, which I loved. I always loved discipline and making sure, and Alicia, you were a student in my class, and I would always harp about being on time. Obviously, I wanted students to have at least covered a little bit of the chapter before we are in class, helping them because the idea is whatever we covered in class, I was helping them with these are the skills and this is the knowledge you're going to need to be successful out in the workplace. So almost like a mentor type professor, and a lot of professors are mentors. I mean, we open our doors to everybody, but I think that's what really drew me. Um, Again, I like to be stimulated by working with companies and organizations, and I do that, and I thoroughly enjoy that because there's a challenge for me. But there's no doubt that in 25 years, a lot of the challenge has been why are the one and two or three or four students that I have in a class are not getting through it? And that becomes a challenge. That's a true challenge for me. And I would think that there are a number of professors who feel that way too. I've heard that from especially community college professors. Again, university professors might have a TA and they might be a little bit more, there might be a little bit more of a distance between them and their students. Not always, not always. I'm not taking that away. But truly, if you are, I kind of joke sometimes that we're not just educators, but we're also social workers because they will pour out all the problems that they have. Sometimes might be to manipulate you and give them a free pass or whatever that might be. But honestly, some of them are going through some pretty hard times. And you've got to help them recognize that even though you might be able to help them, life is not going to be that forgiving. And I like to teach those life lessons and incorporate those life lessons in my classroom. Uh, and again, there's that, but then also I love the content. People know that when I go to Starbucks or when I go to Dunkin' Donuts or if I go to Publix or wherever I go, I'm watching the interaction between employees and employer. And so I bring that into the classroom. And I think that combination of of environment is what I try to bring in. And hopefully they see the holistic picture and that draws them to kind of continue taking the next class and next class. So that's what in a number of years. And when I share that with professionals, they, they'll say things like, "I wish I had a professor like you," and again, only because I'm articulating it. I think a lot of professors want to do that. I think they want to bring it in there. I'm not unique in that sense. I'm just bringing it the way I just know how to do it. That's all. And so I guess I would try to say anybody who was interested in going into higher ed and teaching, if you want to be a scholar and you want to study and do research, I think that's excellent. We need that. We need these books on the walls that are written by smart people like Professor Rich right here, right, Grego. But also we need and I know Rich does this really well in his classes because I've seen it and then bring the book to life. And then, so instead of just reading life out of a book, make that book come to life and apply those skills. And again, I know, Rich, that you've done that and you do that and you pose these questions, and that's why the students love your classes so much. And in that sense, you and I over the last 25 years, we talk about our similarity in that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like you, I guess that's what you do. And maybe it's not just with teachers, probably with any worker in any field, you sort of, or who becomes, especially if you become a supervisor or a leader, you gear your leadership or administrative or teaching style to the person you were, right, as you came up in that field. And like you, I hated school. I hated it from day one. I hated it when I was in elementary school and high school. I was worse. And I didn't like college. And I, like you, I was a lackluster student to say the least, but I love learning, right? Which is an interesting. I remember that quote from, I think it's Mark Twain, who had lots of great quotes. One of the things he said when people asked him about his career success, he said, "One thing I did was I never let my education interfere with my learning," which I think, and I think again, we in our society, we equate the two so much. We equate intelligence with what grade point averages, and we equate knowledge with degrees and things like that. But we don't realize that education is just a credentialing system. I mean, that's all it means. It means
Right.
you've jumped through these hoops they've set up successfully, and this is the certification they've given you for it. That's what a degree is. Does not necessarily mean you've learned anything, although presumably you have, right? Because you've gone through the exercises. But you could sit under a tree and become Socrates or
There you go.
Einstein or whatever and read books. So I think I'm with you there. And that's the way I teach. That's the spirit in which I have always taught. The important thing is learning, not the going through the motions. So
Yeah. One of
I
the
think
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go
Oh,
ahead, Alicia.
sorry. I think it's fascinating that you guys are talking about the fact that you didn't fit into these structures. Because I've had a different experience in a way. I have been really good at twisting myself to fit these structures really well.
Mm,
And also in to a certain aspect of it, I think these structures work really well for me and I've worked really well within them.
mm,
Um, which is very strange because for the longest time, traditional education systems I was not in. I was the last public school that I went to was sixth grade. So the rest of my middle school and high school, I was homeschooled, and a lot of my education was controlled. And maybe that kind of helped me in a lot of aspect because I had my time to literally just indulge in what I wanted to learn, which I think in traditional school structures,
mm.
a lot of times it does stifle that. But I also think it's really cool that like people can see you don't have to get the high GPA. You don't have to get the you don't have to fit really well into these structures to still find value, to still be able to, especially because it makes it a lot easier to connect. The way you were talking about your class, Dr. Ricardo, is very interesting because it really does reflect in the way that the multiple classes that I've been in, even your online ones, the fact that they're structured, but there's still a lot of freedom to where you can indulge in what you love. And that's what I found in a lot of the professors that I've really just like blossomed in the classes is I have enough freedom to be able to kind of find where the parts of what we're learning interest me and just literally go in on it. But I think it's also kind of a part of teaching. Like you said, there's professors who want to do this work and do this work. I've seen it in professors at Indian River, um, where you're trying to help students where they are because a lot of people are they might end up here and they don't even know why they're here. I can imagine there's a lot of younger people who this is just the career path that's kind of put in front of them, or maybe their family was in college so they were put in college. A lot of people, and I think this is a really good thing about colleges, is when you get to meet professors like you guys who you're able to show the value of the curiosity and learning, of taking these things into real life, um, talking and interacting, finding those conflicts and stuff in class and talking through them. And I think it's really valuable. And it feels kind of in a way a really integral part of teaching.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, I mean, I think one thing to keep in mind, I think Herb will agree with this, is that you are an exceptional, I think you are one of those, thank God I got students like that kind of student. Herb and I do not think our professors would have said that. I think some students like me, and I bet the same thing with her, because I tended to, when I was in class, be really engaged because I was interested in learning and that was fun for me. But when it came time to, do things, projects on time, turn in papers when they were supposed to be turned in, do all the reading I was supposed to do, that was not me. Whereas I think problem, I guess, is Alicia, I don't know if they were doing one of those psychological profiles of you, I bet you'd score really high on the conscientiousness part.
Definitely.
Yeah, I bet. But I don't know. I probably would have. Now, Herb is a lot more, in spite of what he says about himself, I think he's a lot more work in terms of work ethic and things like that, conscientious than I am. But again, I don't know if that translated into his schooling. So you could know.
Well, I
I
mean,
don't know.
I am today. I
Yeah,
am
yeah,
today.
yeah, yeah,
And I like you. In the class, I didn't mind somewhat being in the class and putting up my hand and answering questions. I mean, that was sure
yeah.
there was that, but because the structure was just so it was just difficult for me. There was no way I could barely get any work done as far as homework or anything else like that. So,
Yeah, yeah.
I understand that, and yeah, and kind of going back to Alicia, yeah, I couldn't have that. I know I couldn't have a class full of me. Okay,
Yeah,
then I wouldn't
yeah.
be inspired at all. Then I'd be, yeah, I'd be herding cats all day. There's no way I'm going to do that. But the majority of students that are in college generally are ones that want to be there. And even the ones who have
Mm.
a difficult time with education and learning and structure, they do know that this will help them in life. And again, part of what we need to do is we need to explain how the knowledge that you're getting in the classroom um, meets the challenge of the working and just not only the working and professional life, but also your personal life. Again, I talk about organizing, I talk about planning, I talk about an element of structure in your life because people who have that, it makes life a lot easier to live because the world out there is so messy that if you can create some form of structure in your own life, and hey, listen, people who are artists and musicians, they need that little bit of structure, right? You still have to pay rent or have a mortgage or pay electricity bills, insurance, and eat. The money comes in, it's got to go into your bank. There's still some elements of structure, and if you can apply those to other areas of your life, you find that it can just make life a lot easier. And I think what happens is the education environment, the way I see it, and I'll even take this K through 12 as well as primary and also secondary school and then college. I think should be a safe environment where people can learn about what it's like out in the real world. And so that's why it's really important for me to want to believe that our teachers are nurturing and supportive, and that it's not feeling threatening. Now, again, I'm not saying give the farm away and make it so fun and pleasant that no one learns or they can do whatever they want. I don't like that. But as an administrator, you create the environment that you think will produce the best outcome. And the best outcome of an individual is someone who understands what it's going to be like out there when you're an adult and you have to navigate life. Because in college, between school and college, you're only there for 18 years of your life or 21 years, unless you go on and you have a professional degree, such as a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. But even still, chalk it up to 25, 26 years old. Then you're going to live, until you're 70 or 80, right? So it's such a small part of your life that you can learn so much about life in that environment. Not saying that if you don't go to college, you're not learning these things. Of course you are. But there are things that you can learn academically and structurally in a school system that helps you out in the real world. The problem is again, like Richard mentioned, what we're doing is we keep measuring everything. And sometimes, and I understand we have to measure some things, right? Because we have to have what we call outcomes, and we have to measure performance, which I totally understand. But sometimes I think we go overboard on that, right? And we as individuals are quite resilient as humans. So all we need is just a little bit, and it takes us a fair distance. So I think these are the challenges that a professor has, and having to do that in a classroom when you have administrators and curriculum committees, and you have all these things on your back telling you that you have to meet these objectives. And how do you shield your students from these objectives by creating that environment where
Yeah.
they will flourish and learn?
I think that's really interesting that you bring up because there's part of me that within the system of learning and stuff, I do love obviously the education system and people getting access to education. It seems like a wild statement. Um, but it doesn't feel like it's just that small, or for me it feels like it shouldn't just be that small period of your life. I think it is like the beginning, just the couple first years of being a human. You're learning a lot of things. You're learning to walk and talk and do everything from scratch. But I think it's just the process of learning. For me, I feel like there shouldn't be a point where it ever stops. And that might be more of like a philosophical, like life kind of thing. But it feels like, even like you said, even without these systems, without an education system, people go out there and they do work and they interact and experience and do all of these things. And I feel like that is part of also learning, and kind of, it just feels like something that all people should have access to.
Absolutely. In terms of, I mean, I guess because I know that the theme here is supposed to be finding your why, sort of find, as I said, I think alluded to finding what I call my North Star. I don't know why I use that, but you know what I mean. So finding the guide to your destination. I mean, how do you, I don't know, do you guys feel as though, I guess, what would your advice have been to a rogue and scoundrel like me when I was, 18 or whatever to 20, 20, 21 or beyond and beyond. Um, in terms of, what do you do to, I guess, I don't know, what's the ultimate um ground of all this? You find yourself first. I really determine what your values are and how you envision your future, and then you determine what it is then where you want to take your career path and the rest of your life. Or how does it work? Because again, my whole life up to now, which I guess why I went into philosophy. The quest of my life is to find what the quest of one's life should be. The purpose of my life is to find the purpose of my life, or maybe the purpose of life in general, what it should be. So what do you say to people? What do you say? What would you say to fellow students or to your students, Herb, um, who are trying to find who they are and where they want to go, what the hell they're even doing in college or anywhere else they're at? What do you guys think?
You know, I think as I reflect, and I think it's hard for a young person. I know it would have been hard for me to be self-reflecting in my 20s, 30s, or probably even 40s. I think probably 40s was right at that, where there was a lot more self-reflecting
Mm.
of what, but clearly now, decades later, I can look back and believe that I again, it's very cliche-ish, but I truly wanted to make a better world for others out there, and I can't always say that I've met the mark, with friends and family, and certainly disappointed people in my life. There's no doubt, but never out of choice, and as a career path and as a vocation in influencing, hopefully, a lot of people, young people, is to reassure that everything's going to be okay. And as I reflect on that, why do I feel that way? And I think it's because um, growing up, mother was divorced a couple of times, and a lot of my friends' fathers who took me in, would hey, you're going to be okay. And somehow I was probably conveying that I wasn't going to be okay. I was probably conveying some form of anxiety about I don't know where to go, what to do, how to navigate. And all my life, it just seemed that I always had individuals, and generally they were adult men, fathers, um, and then bosses, and then my supervisors and managers and kind of mentors would see that I wanted to achieve and I wanted to do some really good things and just help me along. And so again, it's really cliche-ish, but I then I felt that I was the conduit to others, that when I would see that in them, that I could convey that because I felt the power and the strength of somebody telling me, relax, it's going to be okay. And when
Mm.
I see my students in a classroom that are not only anxious about taking an exam that I'm giving, but also the exams for all their other classes, I'm like, hey, listen, come on over, meet me in my office. Let's kind of take this and let's break it down and let's make it so that it's not this daunting problem that you have. And I used to do that in the workplace with my employees. I would have employees that had personal problems and see how I could help them with that. So I think as a professor, as someone, and Rich, I think it doesn't matter what field of environment that you're in, vocation.
Mm.
You can certainly be this way for, and especially if you're a supervisor or manager. And I do teach this as being a supervisor and manager that you do have to take care of your employees. You know, my first book, Raising Employees,
Yeah.
is part of, saying, hey, don't worry, relax. We're going to work on all this together. So, and being an educator has afforded me the environment to be able to do that. So, I don't know if that answers the question, but but
Mm.
but I think
Yeah.
that because I've been able to do that and I've wanted to do that, it's given me the platform to do that. And that's where I think
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it. And as I say, it's I enjoy it more today uh, than than any other time in my life.
Yeah, and just to quickly interject, because I wanted to ask Alicia the same thing. These talks are such great therapy for me. It dawned on me as well how important, as it does, I really think about this all the time, how important mentors were in my life. And that's one thing we haven't noted probably enough. And I never appreciated in my life how important those mentors were. I mean, you get to my age, if you're like me, especially, you have a ton of regrets, unrequited regrets, and one of them is that I never expressed as much as I should have, especially at the time, how important these people were to me and how much they meant to me. So I get exactly where you're coming from there, and I remember in that book, Raising Employees, that was one of the, I think, for the first book, a great message of that book, that when I read it. So, but I was wondering, I was curious to know what Alicia thinks. I mean, you're sort of working through this yourself now in real time. So
I,
not
I
to
think
mention other people around you. So
I think it's really interesting. I would recommend exactly what Dr. Ricardo is talking about of, finding for me, it's much more motivating the idea of how I can contribute to helping other people and building community and all of those things. And I feel like those are really key parts of doing that. Um, but I think to add on top of that, I would also say get out there, go do things.
mm,
It's on top of that, it's going to be okay. It's okay to fail. It's okay. And I think there's a really good conversation that we could probably have like a topic that we could do of, what I feel like teaching and mentorship are very much connected in a lot of ways. Um, and there's a lot of value that comes out of that relationship for both sides of it. But I think it's so key and really getting the confidence to be able to go out there and do things because it's through that you get those new experiences, you meet those new people, you're able to see how you can help and build. And it's I think it's really important thing, especially because for me, seeing my generation, it's very easy to hide and just stay on our phone and
mm,
just watch the world burn, if I'm gonna be honest.
mm,
So it feels like having that or pushing that action of going out there of doing things of yes, things are scary, but it's going to be okay. And those experiences are kind of part of life. They're the fulfilling things that a lot of us find in life. And I would you agree? Either of you?
Yeah, I think that's a great prescription for if you're looking to find who you are, that's how you do it, right? You get it, you jump into life
You
and
can't
start
tell what you
exploring.
like without
Yeah.
going out there and doing things. And that's really been a learning experience for me, reflecting on I really did get out there and do things in the past pretty much since 2024. And the experiences that I've had have been really key, I feel like, in building who I'm going to be for the rest of my life. I mean, I guess you could say that about all parts of your life, but for me, reflecting on different sections of my life, being isolated in my, own little world, being homeschooled, um, it's a very different experience. And I feel like I've gotten a lot of value out of that older experience, but I've gotten a lot more value out of just this past 2 years or so.
Quick question for you guys again. I'll be quick. I'm just curious because what you say, Alicia, raises this question for me. That I've been reading many articles lately. I bet probably you guys have as well. You're interested in this sort of thing as well about how in your generation in particular, Alicia, there's this sort of emerging creeping nihilism. For anybody who's watching the show, nihilism again is the perspective on that life is meaningless. There's just no hope. There's no purpose. There's no point, and existence is un uh, incomprehensible ultimately, and there's no point in even trying anyway. That's nihilism, and it's there are nihilistic philosophies. People all throughout history have wrestled with the concept, but they say very often people who are commenting on current society are talking about this merging nihilism, especially among your generation, Alicia. Due to a lot of things, right? Lack of tradition. We've talked about on this show, right? Lack of traditional sort of frameworks that would tell people what the purpose of life is, right? Whether it was religion or family or a school system that anybody gave a damn about, and that kind of thing. And combined with this, how easy it is now for people of any age in any situation to just withdraw into their own comfortable little world and not have to worry about, just to escape from having to confront what you need to confront in order to realize what the meaning of life is or what the meaning of even of your own life is. So that there's this emerging sort of nihilism that's creeping through society, and that explains a lot of what we see happening politically. I won't comment on that, but and a lot of what we see happening as far as education, the educational trends, accomplishment trends in education, workforce issues that we see and that we've talked about on this show. Do you think that that's the case, you guys? Do you find that? Do you think that, or do you think that's a bunch of old curmudgeons saying, "Oh, look at the younger generation"? Or do you think there's really something
This
going on now?
this is definitely an episode on its own because I feel like nihilism is very prevalent within my generation.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if it's just the access we have to this philosophy and things, but like it feels like it's bled into how we interact with each other in a lot of ways, the way we speak. Yeah, I feel like we could do a whole episode on it, but to
Mhm.
shortly answer your question, I think
Yeah.
nihilism is definitely a prevalent thing,
Mm.
especially in my generation.
I think I know what you'd say, Herb. You're going to say affirmative, correct?
Yeah. So there's no doubt that things feel different today. And I think they feel different today because they are different today. There's no doubt about that. Um, but the flip side to it is I also say to individuals, look at the stuff that you're watching on your phones and on the computer, and maybe some of you on TV. And I had a colleague who was talking to me about all of her ideas and thoughts about how the world is coming to, it's burning down and everything else. And, she's up there in age. And so I said, hang on a second, hang on. What influence do you have over everything that's going on in the rest of the world? How's your life? Are you able to get a good meal? Are you able to eat well? And she goes, oh yeah. She lives on the beach, okay. She's got a nice house. she's healthy. She's got a healthy family. So I say, hey, there is no doubt that there are external um, concerns out there for individuals, and there always has been. And maybe it appears that there are more today than ever before. Okay, and maybe there are, right? But at the end of the day, we live. We don't live out there. Here's the philosophy side. We live in our minds. Whatever we believe, we project. Okay. And so what I try to do now, again, I'm not naive. I'm not naive to believe things are happening. And they do affect us, right? If we care, things that happen, that's what makes us a community. That's what makes us a country, right? And a world. So there's nothing wrong with understanding that, but there's a key in putting things in perspective. And that's why in my classroom, when we have discussions, I'm like, okay, we can have the discussion and I want to have the discussion and I want to feel your passion. But then I also want you to put things in perspective because at the end of the day, after our conversation and all the passions have come out, you're going to walk out that door, you're going to get into your car, you're going to drive to Chick-fil-A, you're going to go to Dunkin' Donuts, you're going to see your friends, you're going to hang out, okay? And so there are these things. Now, can we change some things in our community? No doubt about it. If we find that there aren't too many places for us young people to hang out, let's create an environment to hang out because someone's not going to do it for us, right? So, yeah, there's no doubt that we live in times when things, and again, you have to think about back in the 60s and in the 70s, we have recessive times. There were conflicts between the government and people and universities. There was all that going on. Okay, obviously we went through a time frame where it wasn't. Then, of course, at the beginning of this current century in 2000, 2001, for the next almost decade, we were in a major war with other countries. So again, what we have to try to do, I think, I love what you had to say, Alicia. Put your phone down sometimes, go out there, hang out with your friends, take your dog out for a walk and meet other dog walkers. For those particular moments, you're going to be so happy. You're going to watch your dogs play with each other and everything else. You're going to go out with your friends. You can't minimize those interactions and only maximize the interactions that you see on your phone. You have to
Mm.
understand that those interactions, that hour that you spent, is stronger and should be more powerful to you than the hour that you spent reading about um, a building burning down, right? Okay, so that's what, again, I'm not trying to minimize. I'm not trying to say don't think about. No, I want people to think about what's going on out there, and we've got to be aware and we've got to be a good citizen and share our concerns and ideas. But let's put it in perspective so that we live as much as we can the life that we want.
I have to get going soon, but I think this is something that's really, I don't know if you guys have heard this saying before, but it's kind of in a way smarmy insult, a kind of way of telling people is like go touch grass, go touch grass. And it's
Mhm.
basically essentially go outside, put the phone down, and go ground yourself. See actual people, real people, because I think it's very easy to distort our reality due to which we have to realize we have only had access to these smartphones since when I was born, and I'm an infant compared to you guys. Um, Smartphones did not exist until '09 when I was like 10, or like the original smartphones. So, and they've only gotten more and more integrated into our life to where I think just post-pandemic, phones are just they're there constantly. They're the way that maybe television was kind of ginormous for people. Like it's always on in the background for some people sometimes. This constant sense of content and media, which is great in some aspects. I love certain aspects of it, connecting people, getting the word out there for certain things. But I think it's really important for us to kind of keep that in mind, that touch grass, because our interactions with real people are what we're going to remember.
That's an
Um,
excellent note on which to conclude almost,
Yes,
right?
I was going to
Yeah.
say, so if you are a human, go out there and touch grass. Cow, go out there and eat grass. Okay. Thank you all so much. Great, again, our great Friday morning interaction. Rich, great to see you, and thanks for all your support there. Alicia, terrific stuff. I know you've got some really cool stuff going on today, so knock it out of the ballpark, okay? And thank you
Thank
all
you.
for being a part of this too. And again, remember, if you like us, go ahead and hit that subscribe. So until next week, everybody have a terrific one and keep it between the lines. Thanks for hanging out with us today. We look forward to next week as we cover another cool and fun topic. This podcast was produced by Three Lions Production and sponsored by Consulting and Training. Until next time, keep it between the lines.